When you think about the legacy of World War I, your mind probably goes to the battlefield, right? But what if I told you its biggest impact was actually on the American economy? Today, we're diving into a really fascinating argument that WWI created the very blueprint for the modern partnership between the state and big corporations.
And that's really the core question of the source material we're looking at today. The whole argument is that the war wasn't just some military conflict. It was a full-blown economic revolution, one that created a model for, well, pretty much the rest of the 20th century. And that model has a name: war collectivism.
So what exactly is war collectivism? Well, according to the source, you gotta understand what it's not. It's not socialism, but it's definitely not free market capitalism either. It's this new hybrid, a centrally planned economy, but one that was run by big business interests through the government. It was a template for what the author calls state corporate capitalism.
Okay, so how did this whole new model actually work? The source argues this wasn't just some temporary wartime thing. No, this was a massive turning point that created an entirely new economic order in America. The source has a really interesting name for this: a new mercantilism. Now, the old-school mercantilism was pretty openly about powerful groups enriching themselves. This new version, though, was way more sophisticated. It was wrapped in the language of progress, of the common good and national welfare. It was this powerful partnership between the government and corporations sold to everybody as the modern, efficient way to handle a crisis.
All right, a system this huge doesn't just spring up overnight, right? So who were the masterminds behind it? Let's take a look at the key players and the organizations they built to run this thing. It actually started even before the U.S. officially jumped into the war. In 1916, they created the Council of National Defense, the CND, and its mission was, and I'm quoting here, to organize the whole industrial mechanism. The crazy part? They brought business titans like Walter Gifford from AT&T and the financier Bernard Baruch straight into the government to do the planning, while they were basically still in their private sector roles.
But the CND? That was just the opening act. The real main event, the real nerve center of this whole operation, was the War Industries Board, or WIB for short. This board had an incredible amount of power. It decided what the government bought, who got crucial raw materials, and, this is the big one, it literally fixed prices for huge chunks of the American economy.
So how in the world did they pull this off? The source lays out this incredible four-step playbook. First, the WIB got industries to form their own committees, run by their own top execs. Then, these committees cooperated with the government to fix prices and decide who got what. After that, they standardized everything, cutting down on variety. And the final step? They eliminated what they called wasteful competition. In reality, this created government-backed cartels, where a few big players could control an entire industry.
And who was at the very top of this pyramid, pulling all the strings? One man: Bernard Baruch. He was a hugely powerful Wall Street financier who became the last chairman of the WIB. And the source doesn't mince words here, calling him the autocrat who had almost absolute power over the U.S. economy.
Okay, so we've got the structure down, but what did this command and control system actually look like for regular industries on the ground? Well, the source gives some pretty eye-opening examples.
Nothing tells the story better than a direct quote. And this one, wow, it's from the chairman of the price-fixing committee himself. "We are not in an attitude of envying you your profits. We are more in the attitude of justifying them if we can." According to the source, that quote says it all. The government's job wasn't to push back on profits, it was to help justify them.
This table just lays it all out, plain and simple. Look at the difference between the public reason and what the source says actually happened. For steel, the rationale was prevent inflation, but the result was guaranteed high profits for the big companies. For copper, it was ensure supply, but that led to a nearly 100% profit guarantee for some. And get this, for wheat, they didn't set a price cap to keep prices down for people. They set a high price floor to guarantee profits for farmers.
And then you've got the Food Administration, run by a guy you might have heard of, a young Herbert Hoover. The power they had was just immense. We're talking the power to license literally every food dealer in America. They set prices using a cost plus reasonable profit formula, which the source says basically just cartelized the whole food industry. They even had citizen volunteers going around to enforce their rules, all while telling bakers exactly how to make their bread.
The story of sugar is just wild. The source describes how this international committee, led by the US, basically formed a giant buying club, a cartel, to bully Cuba into selling their raw sugar cheap. And when Cuba's government pushed back, the US government apparently played hardball. It threatened to withhold vital exports like wheat and coal until they got their way, all to help out American sugar refining companies.
And what about the railroads? The government straight up seized them. But here's the twist. This wasn't some kind of punishment. According to the source, it was like hitting the jackpot for the railroad owners. They were guaranteed profits equal to their best years before the war. And who did the government put in charge of running things? A board made up of, you guessed it, top railroad executives, who then got rid of competition to make things more efficient.
Okay, so this is the absolute crucial point the source is making. This whole system, it didn't just pack up and go home when the war ended. Nope. In fact, the argument is that this wartime experiment became the permanent blueprint for the future of the American economy. And this is the big reveal. The whole thesis of the essay in one slide. The War Industries Board, the WIB, is presented as the direct ancestor of the New Deal's famous National Recovery Administration, the NRA. And Herbert Hoover's Food Administration, that became the model for the Agricultural Adjustment Administration, the AAA. Think about that for a second. The source is arguing that the big, sweeping government programs of the 1930s weren't new at all. They were just dusting off the old wartime playbook. And the list just keeps going. The source argues the connections are everywhere. The Reconstruction Finance Corporation that propped up banks, a revival of the War Finance Corporation, the huge Tennessee Valley Authority project, it grew out of a government power plant built during the war. Even things like the Civilian Conservation Corps and federal housing programs, the essay traces them all back to ideas tried out during World War I.
So in the end, what the essay is really saying is that this war collectivism was a win-win-win for a new power elite. For big business, it was a dream come true, a way to stabilize profits and get rid of messy competition. For politicians, it was a brand new, powerful way to direct society. And for a lot of intellectuals, it was seen as this enlightened third way between pure capitalism and socialism, a planned economy that they, of course, believed they could manage perfectly.
And that brings us to the final, really powerful question the source leaves us with. It tells a story where these emergency measures, created for a temporary crisis, never really left. They just became the blueprint for a new reality. So it makes you wonder, right? At what point does a temporary fix just become the way things are?